the average global learning poverty rate in sub-Saharan Africa has hit about 90%. What risks will this pose to the growth of economies of this region? Omowale David-Ashiru, Africa Director at NewGlobe, weighs in.
Gloss over it. We just had the Transforming Education Summit, right? And this was the focus. I mean, just to give some perspective, we all know that the UN General Assembly just held, right? And dealing with different issues, war, global food crisis. But it's instructive that the UN Secretary General chose to call a special summit around none of these issues, but education. I want to give you the scale of how important this is. And just like you said, the learning poverty, it's actually 90% of 10-year-olds in sub-Saharan Africa cannot read a simple text. 2/3 of children globally, 10-year-olds, cannot read or understand a simple sentence. And of course, we know educate your people, you improve your economy. The literature shows that. So in terms of how that's, the socio-economic importance is, it's clear. So that is the learning poverty, that is the crisis, that is what the Education Summit, deliberated on, the depth and breadth of these problems.
You actually make it even worse in terms of the statistics. You say now 90%. Now, this is not actually the first time calls to transform education are actually being made. In 2020, at the UN General Assembly dialogue, did actually call for action to tackle education crisis. And the UN General Assembly President Tijani Mohamed Bade did outline education challenges in his address, including a decline in education quality and standards. And like you said, just the other day, a similar call was just being made at the concluded UN General Assembly. But from a perspective of solutions, are you trying, or are those dealing with this trying to solve the education crisis by simply doing more of the same, but only faster and better this time?
I love the question, and the reason I can smile is because there is a solution. We're already seeing that, and I will talk about that. But just to further buttress what you said, we have been having these calls, and what we've seen is that we've sort of been able to drive enrollment. So we have more children in schools. The reason this is a crisis is that statistic that we've been mentioning is not just about children out of school. These are children in schools who are not learning. And that's why it's even, more critical. So in terms of solutions, we are excited because a recent study that was done on the NewGlobe methodology, NewGlobe is the company that I work with, by Michael Kremer, a Nobel laureate, showed amazing results. The effects of this study, according to him, is one of the largest in the international education literature. And maybe just to break it down, what are some of the, the results that are getting us excited? Mm-hmm. Primary school students taught using the NewGlobe methodology learned in 2 years, what their counterparts in other schools learned in 3 years. And then even at the early education level, 3 to 5 year olds, which is really important because a lot of focus is on foundational literacy and numeracy. The real results were even more amazing. Mm-hmm. In 2 years in a NewGlobe supported school, they learned an equivalent of what they would have in 3.5 years in alternative schools. Mm-hmm. We are excited about this because these are solutions we're providing at scale, and that is important. The learning poverty is at scale, affecting millions of children. So the solutions, the interventions must be at scale. Right. And that's what we are excited about.
And upscaling.
The learning poverty can be converted to learning gains.
Right, and also can be converted into business opportunities. And that's why I want to talk to you about the opportunities for the business sector in investing in education. You're talking of a crisis, and this should be appetite for those with the money. Why is it that we are not probably seeing more of investments in there? And where exactly would you be recommending investment? Where are the opportunities to invest in the education sector to deal with this education poverty?
Right. I mean, why are we not seeing? We're seeing a bit, but I mean, to be fair, we've just come off the COVID pandemic. Governments have a lot of priorities, right? So there are a lot of things pulling for resources. But to your point, I see no greater investment than this. If we say education transforms the economy, or maybe to put it more, just in layman's terms, children are the future of the world. I don't see anything more important than investing in the future. So that really is what the governments and all of us should be doing more of.
In conclusion, I want also to find out what sort of creative financing models would you be recommending? Because, you know, it's one thing to talk about the opportunities, but it's another to be able to creatively finance, because there are those who want to jump in, but funding becomes a challenge. And of course, also talking about the ed tech, those who are using technology in the education sector. We saw COVID-19, drawing a parallel in terms of the gap between, those who have and those who don't have. How do we ensure that, those with the ideas are getting the proper funding, but also not leaving anyone behind with those solutions that are being brought up?
Absolutely. And, I would say three things. One, it's not necessarily about spending more money. It's about getting more out of the money that we are spending. And that's why that's why I talked about the methodology we're using. It's about getting more, being more efficient in the money that we do spend. And then, secondly, it's one thing to budget. It's a different thing to spend. So we are increasing budgets around the world, but we must make sure that that expenditure is going into education. And in terms of, funding opportunities, there are many collaborations going on. But I think governments, you need to put your money where your mouth is. So the governments have to do something, first of all. One of the state governments we're working with, Edo State, is an example where they invested in transforming their education, and they were noticed by the World Bank and got a $75 million or even more investment, one of the only subnationals to be invested in by the World Bank. So I think that's the route to go. We must spend our money more efficiently, do something, and then we get collaboration from others who see what we're doing, what the governments are doing.
Right. Any plans for East Africa in terms of investment in what you do, in terms of also sorting out the learning poverty that you just talked about earlier in our conversation?
Definitely, we are open. We partner with visionary governments who want to transform education. So we are open for business. We are open to investing, technical support in any government who wants to transform their education, East Africa and all of Africa.